first aspect we're going to focus on is why. What is your reason for doing that? And the reason why I want to get that out of the way immediately is because in 99% of the cases, this is going to be the return on investment you're going to measure. Okay. And if you understand that, this is the link between the business and the development aspects. So for a lot of you, it's going to depend on who you are and in what industry you're in. Let me give you an example. If you are in mining, and you are a member of the International Council for Metals and Mines, you've got to belong to it if you're a mine, right? Then your community relations is going to focus on license to operate conditions. What does that mean? In South Africa, if you want a mining license, which you get from the Department of Mineral Resources, the DMR, before they give you that license, they're going to ask, it's part of the license to operate conditions, where is your social and labor plan? So your whole social investment and development portfolio has got to focus on that. And the DMR is very prescriptive in that you've got to do engagement with communities, you've got to do a needs assessment within those communities. The ICMM is very clear, you've got to make sure there's no human rights violations, infringements in your programs. Your whole program structure will look differently because one of your most important stakeholder groups is government, which is why they end up doing so much infrastructure development. So depending on your industry is generally the first case for the business case. Now, if you're in financial services, for instance, the Financial Services Charter is very clear on that. It says thou shalt spend 1.5% on net profit after tax on financial inclusivity. If you're in retail banking products for previously unbanked, okay? So the business case is for a lot of us in specific industries very clearly defined, and you've got to integrate that in your CSI strategy. So it can come from global certification requirements. For instance, if you're in oil and gas, your industry standard would be IPICA. IPICA is very clear around, again, human rights. It's very clear on environmental practices. So your CSI slant will take a greater environmental focus. Okay, so global certification requirements if you're multinational. For some of us, it's a competitive advantage. Let's use financial services again. We've got the banks, then we've got the insurers, right? And we want to make sure that our programs is very clearly identified. Because the reason why we want to do that is so that we can get the reputation benefit out of that. So ABSA is not going to do the same kind of program as Standard Bank as Nedbank. Okay? So that will have an influence on their business case. For a number of companies, for instance, the FMCG industry, the customer aspect, the consumer aspect becomes very important. Why? Because that's part of their branding reputation story. So that's going to inform their business case. Legal requirements, we've spoken a lot about BEE requirements, and Tracy has shared with us how that have changed their whole focus area to look more at economic as opposed to pure developmental initiatives. Risk management. If you think about, say, look at the mining sector again, because of environmental and negative impact around that, they're going to make sure there's environmental programs in the mix. It's not just going to be pure social programs. Reputation, and then the war on talent. Now, what we find, for instance, in white-collar, service-based kind of companies, because they're looking for specific skills, that is the kind of stuff they will fund. Let me give you an example. We think about KPMG, we think about EY, we think about Deloitte, we think about Syca. Those kind of people, the industry they're in, they're looking for talent, so it makes sense that they will invest in bursaries, in graduation development, in recruiting future pipelines. So the business case for every company is going to be different. And you've got to figure out what is your business case. Now, which is very interesting because we've got the Northwest University here. And already it was shared this morning. Our focus is students. Now, remember, that is part of their industry requirements as well from a higher education. They've got to do community engagement. It's not called CSI in that space. It's called community engagement. They've got to be relevant to the communities in which they're based. They've got to create future students, future workforces, and they want to make sure that those students are responsible and not corporate citizens, but responsible citizens in the future. This is the new millennium generation. So their business case is driven a lot by student requirements, student interest, student involvement. So again, the point that I want to make is every industry, every company will find a different reason to hook their CSI strategy around. And I want to start with business case first, because in a business environment, a business language works. Where I've seen the biggest conflict between the social investment or development division and the rest of the business is when they speak this tree-hugging, soft kind of language. They don't speak about business case. They don't speak about return on investment. And then people think, oh, those are the people who just waste our money. You know, we must make the money in this side of the business so they can give it away on that side of the business. So what we find is that the business case is the reason for either the existing budget or an increase in budget. It's the reason for the specific portfolios we choose to invest in. So whatever your business drivers are, it will influence the kind of investment portfolios that you choose. And as I said, the reason why this has become so important is because our return on investment indicators are linked in that. Let me give you a case study. So there is the Nedbank Foundation. It's the Green Bank. It's a customer consumer-faced company. Of course, they want to distinguish themselves in the retail banking space. So one of their products is credit cards. Now, the Green Bank has realized if they tap from a brand perspective into the hearts and minds of their customers, they will do much better. And there's precedent for that thinking. Think about Woolworths and the My School card. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a way as well to leverage resources. So instead of Woolworths paying all the money, their customers are contributing to it. So they tap into, from a brand perspective, into that. That is their business case. So Nedbank did very much the same. This time they used a very specific product, credit cards. So as a consumer, you and I have got a choice. We can go to the red bank or the blue bank or the green bank. The Green Bank was just thinking, if we can tap into the emotions, that will give us a competitive advantage over the others. They created 4 credit cards. The Sports Trust for those people who are interested in sports. The Arts and Culture Trust for those who are interested in that. The Nelson Mandela children's fund for people who want to focus on children, and I forgot the fourth one. The Green Trust. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the greenies out there in the Green Bank. Because we've done an impact assessment, I can share with you the value of that business case. How many more or new credit cards was issued to customers? I can share with you how the transaction values of those credit card transactions went up. And I can even share with you how much was contributed to those trusts. Very clear return on investment indicators. Pure profit. So what has happened is that CSI, remember I said to you when we started with the trends this morning, a requirement these days of social investment is that it contributes to capital. In this case, social investment contributes to financial capital, to profitability. It's good for the business. And guess what? It didn't cost them a cent, because the customers pay for it. It's actually the customer's contribution. So your business case is very important to understand and make the link between this voluntary activity, if you do CSI, or the economic activity from a SED perspective, that is very clearly defined, because that's the value you give back to the business.
My question, it might be a bit of a loaded question, but it's around how you separate the other things that might have impacted consumers taking on a particular product or a green card. And I ask that because we talk about things with SED, we talk about competitive advantage and social license to operate, and how do we start to measure the direct impact of our SED and CSI on those things without being influenced by all of the other things that the organization is doing in that community to influence social license to operate or competitive advantage or loyalty or all of that?
Thank you. We will get back to it when we get to measurement on the third day, but it's a very important question. When you start measuring that the first time, it's actually not that important, because it's a process you grow into it. And you can only test that, and you'll see when we get to the indicators to measure return on investment. How will I know? And that is actually your question. And the only way you can find that out is by asking. So you will do a perception survey. Let me give you an example. So we all know Johnson & Johnson, and we know that once a year, especially in winter, they do this Elizabeth Ann's baby shampoo, and then everything, 10 cents off every product. Now that's now a different kind of, it's course-related marketing. So in that regard, it is, why do the sales go up? So there's an abnormality. So we can't, as the CSI division, claim all of the sales. But there's a very strong argument to say, supported by the marketing from please buy this product because there's a good cause behind it. Because we've driven that. That is our contribution. Can you see what I'm saying? So I'm just saying we're not claiming all the sales of Elizabeth Ann's. We're claiming and we're trying to measure that difference, because that's directly related to our division's efforts. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and I'm sure as we get into it as well.
Yes, yes. Let me give you another example. So it's work we've done with MultiChoice. Now, MultiChoice has got Mnet, DSTV, SuperSport, and MultiChoice Africa. Right. Every December, if you're a subscriber to DSTV, you can send in a project in the community in which you live to get funds. And then DSTV will contribute that on your behalf. What they then do is, because it's isolated, either regional, geographical, specific kind of organization, They then engage, because we've done that with those subscribers. So ask, does that make you think different about your DSTV subscription? Does it give you a different perception? Does it make you more loyal? Did your views of us change? Do you now think we're a company with a heart? So I'm just saying there are other tools we use. Because the one thing we don't want to do is upset the existing measurement system. You know how salespeople are? We can't claim all their efforts. But we want to make sure that that is credible evidence that we put forward.
Question, Your Honor. So a company like Nedbank, where it's not actually their contribution, they've used their customers as partners for
Yes.
What do they claim as their investment? Do they then claim the infrastructure and the cost of that they've provided, the cost of issuing the cards, the cost of marketing this campaign? Is that then what they claim as?
It's a beautiful question. Thank you so much for that. Because it was one of the issues I wanted to know more about, specifically in Woolworths' case. So Woolworths would, for instance, when they report on their CSI spend, would say 120 million rand a year. Just go and you can Google it, look at their sustainability report. But if you analyze, did they give 120 million rand? No. Their clearly defined cash portion was probably 10 million. And that went to the Edu Trust. But when it comes to this section called the Woolworths card or the Woolworths school card, they actually only report on the customer contribution. They have not taken their own costs in that case. But in the case of Nedbank, that is part of hidden operational costs. So they only, at this point in time, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying if you look at current reporting practice, nobody reports on the cost of doing that. They look at the nicer story of our customers contributed. Nedbank specifically reported on what went to Nelson Mandela Children's Fund in 1 year. If you extrapolate that, it's a beautiful story, it's a beautiful narrative over 5 years. We're looking at almost close to 100 million rand. But it's not come at the cost of what Nedbank's paid for it. No, that is part of operating expenses. So they prefer the narrative because the business case is customer loyalty, brand reputation kind of initiative. They try to focus on that. So it's a very good question, but we don't find such honest reporting as yet, reflecting both cost and profit. That is the reality of it. It's the truth. I can't hide that from you. And when we come to operations and we speak about budgets tomorrow, we're going to address it again. But it's a very important question that...
Rihanna, it's probably the same as this 2 rand of KFC.
Oh, yes, yes.
We had it 2 years ago at our conference, CSI conference in Namibia. But the one thing that stood out was the pictures of the children with buckets of porridge and a sauce. So one of them we were asking, so where is the chicken? In the bucket. It's KFC, but there's no chicken in it. So,
Don't let us tell you the KFC story from South Africa. We don't want to go there. But now when KFC reports, related to Charlene's question, is the narrative they would share is, look at the good we've done. Our customers collectively contributed 20 million, which translated into 20,000 food portions, full stop. That's where the narrative currently ends. Not at, we've used 1 rand of that for operational expenses and marketing and the packaging and the administration and we're not getting into, this is the reality, that's the story. Yes. So what I've got here is now, depending on what your business objectives is, whether it's to leverage your social investment as a reputation driver or to obtain a license to operate, you will actually document this. Why is this important? At the end of the year, you're going to come back because these are your indicators. The last day, we're going to focus a lot on impact and return indicators, but this is important so that we all know why we do certain things. We're going to then look at the business benefits and the business case. Very important, because these are the indicators we're going to report back on. If you're in oil and gas and you fund the Treepreneur program in KZN, it is to mitigate negative carbon emissions. That's the business case for that environmental program. So at the end of the year, we're going to measure the amount of, or the tons of, carbon sequestrated through the Treepreneur program. And that's the return on investment for the business. Now, my question to you is, how would you establish a business case for your industry? What I've done here is I've put up quite a few industries, and I've tried to group them together, but also show you the differences that could appear. Because when we look, for instance, at financial services, we just say like, financial services. What would be the business case if you're in the financial services sector? That's just one question, though. The other question is, what's the difference between retail banking and insurance products? Right? And I've done the same with mining as opposed to oil and gas. I've done the same with retail, so clothing versus food. Tourism and hospitality, so travel versus accommodation. And manufacturing, sorry Tracy, I didn't know. And also Sandra, in a manufacturing context, what would be your different business cases? I know you're probably more services. You actually, now see how interesting this is? So you're a car rental company. That is so interesting. I would have thought services, and you travel and tourism. In your case, what industry classification would you?
In mining.
Mining. Then explosives. Very interesting. So I'm going to give you like 2 minutes. You can either work with your colleagues, so those of you like academia or financial services, or you can turn to your neighbor and just use one. I just want you to understand the importance of defining the business case. If you were the social investor, and you in financial services, and you are into banking, what could be the potential business case for your social investment? Okay? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to figure that out.
No, sorry, so do you want an example for what the CSI could look like, or as well, or what the focus should be because of the sector you're in, or both?
Both. And that is exactly the point that I want to bring across. How do you choose? That's exactly the point that I want to, because, you know, CSI practitioners are generally very lonely people. They've got to make a lot of decisions. It's them against the whole organization. And yet they've got to stand up and justify either the budget or the increase in the budget or the expenditure for a specific program. And I'm looking for what are those kind of words, the arguments you can use to establish the business case, to give it that credibility. So it's both. Please share with us your business case. So are you going to focus on financial services? And are you going to focus on insurance services?
A bit of both.
Oh, fantastic. Please share with us.
The thorn amongst the roses, like I said, not choice. From the financial services perspective, we looked at how would CSI be more appealing or make sense to business in terms of looking at creating future clients, whether in the banking sector or the insurance sector, because we're looking at the gaps that we find in communities where people don't necessarily understand the products that are on offer, and they won't even have a perfect understanding of what banking really is in terms of savings, interest, and compound interest. So we're looking at those areas whereby now we're empowering them to be able to make more astute decisions, and then we can also become the brand of choice, because they knew that brand X came to my community and educated me about banking or a certain insurance product. And then once now they're financially or economically active through some of the programs that we're running, now they can also become that ROI we're looking for, to say through these interventions we've managed to get more future clients.
It's amazing. So your underlying, listen to the words I'm using, your underlying theory of change is based on the fact that you're going to grow future economically active customers. So in actual fact, you're going to create more customers for the bank. The reason why I've used those words is because your business case, 90% of the cases determine your theory of change, why you do what you do. We're going to go into theory of change today still, but it's very important. Let me just unpack what he said. So he's thinking, his worldview. If we empower people, if we include them in the financial services sector, they're going to become customers of the bank or the insurer. We're going to benefit and they're going to benefit because they're going to have bank accounts, they can transact, there's financial inclusivity, there's financial growth, there's financial empowerment, economically active, financial sustainability. There's a very particular path how his logic went. It's very important because it dictates to you how he thinks the change will happen. And that's what he's going to document in his theory of change. It's a very important point that you've made, and I just want to give it our practices language. Now, his competitors could have said, where he looked at retail or insurance products, our future sustainability, our competitive differentiation, our competitive advantage is not going to lie in bringing more customers on board for us, but our biggest need is to look for future employees. So he thinks economic activation, people need money to buy his products and services. If you don't need bank accounts, if you're that poor, you don't need a bank account, that's not his customer growth strategy. His competitors could say, our future sustainability is going to depend on the people we need to work for us. So we're going to focus, instead of a financial economic activation or financial inclusive or a financial customer acquisition strategy, we're going to focus on a future talent pipeline. That is our theory of change. So your business case is going to determine what you fund, why you fund that, and the how it's going to come out in the next process. It was very good. So the value, the return on investment that your social investment portfolio is going to contribute to the business is assistance in customer acquisition, customer growth, new customers. So, which is very important, you've got to actually already have an indicator. Now remember Sharissa's question, how do I know it's because of what we did in CSI? So you've got to have that as a very important indicator to start measuring right from the word go. Thank you very much. I just want to link it so that people get a context for why you answered that question. Anybody else wants to volunteer? Okay. So, you must have a reason why you want to do social investment? Like in your case, you told us it's to protect the bees and the trees.
Yeah, well, maybe just maybe a different approach. Basically, what we've done, or why we do such projects, we started a lot of various projects basically. Some of them are health related, some of them is just community projects. We engage communities just to find out their interest, because we don't want to start projects that will die down eventually. But at the same time, you don't want to spend a lot of time managing those projects. You don't want to find ourselves managing those projects. So what we've done, for instance, maybe just take just one case in point. We capacitate, because we grow the trees, but we also have a meal. We capacitate communities, we train them on how to make, for instance, beehive boxes. And we've got another NGO to come and train them on business skills and also how to take care of bees, basically. So this company is also a US NGO called Technosec, probably they also start. So they also basically train these people for free. It's because we like this partnership, so that it doesn't become expensive for the company. Almost using the concept of shared values. So in the guys can trap the bees from our plantations. One, it's going to reduce the number of hives in the plantation, so ultimately reducing the risk of the hives in the plantations. And two, it makes the community to value the plantation, because they know they're actually getting a resource from the plantation. They're getting the bees. At the same time, we allow them to actually get what we call non-timber forest products, like firewood or your indigenous leafy plants, or things like that, the nets, the grass for making nets, those kind of things. We allow them to go there. But our approach is that we try to make them value the plantation in a way. Ultimately, that will make them to reduce our risk. And because we are an internationally certified company, like this Forest Stewardship Council certified, we make them understand the obligations of the certificate. So we go during our interactions. They know what FSC is, and ultimately we ask them to play a role in making sure that we achieve and maintain our certification.
It's a beautiful example, because it almost incorporates all of that. It's for international certification, for responsible forestry stewardship. It is to get the support of the local community to manage the risk that there's no fires. Because a fire, your whole profit is gone. Can you see what I'm saying? So that is one of, to get the customer to, as a risk management strategy. It is a beautiful a strategy, probably not because you're going to recruit from the community, but there's a lot of those business drivers. So the reason why we invest in the community is to help with our international certification. So every year you get it, it's for the South African companies, every year you get a BS certificate, you've supported legislative requirements. That's a beautiful case study. Thank you so much. In Richard's case, what was one of the interesting things is because actually Anglo doesn't mine in Namibia anymore. So what would be the business case for Anglo to invest in the Namibian communities?
So basically, as you know, that mining is those bad guys that go into any country, any town, or any land and do their thing and go out. So when Anglo sold their last operation in Namibia in 2009, they feel that we must leave a legacy and change that approach of everybody outside, or they're thinking of them that they just go in, do their thing and go out. So then the foundation was established, and then this is why we give back. So one, it was a repetition issue, so reputation issue, and also to risk the name of Anglo going further in the world. So for us, that was the case. That was this case.
So it was a commitment made previously, because companies live very much in the present. But mining is one of those companies who's got very long histories. A mining license, you know, I don't know if you know, a lifetime of a mine is 25 years, so a mining license is only for 25 years. But you know as well as I do that mines have built probably 20-30% of all the towns in the country. But they're no longer there. And there was a massive big case with the Namakwa mines when they sold to a different company. They're still responsible for the rehabilitation of that land. So that is the business case. It is a commitment that we've made, and we've got to look after that. So the reason why the business case is so important is because this is one of the aspects NGOs very seldom understand. Up until now, NGOs got funding, not now, I would say about 5 years ago, because they were doing good work. But because the landscape for social investors or commercial social investors, corporate social investors have changed, their reason for funding have changed. So if you're an NGO and you say, give me the money because I'm going to do good, that's no longer good enough. You've got to show the value of why they should give you the money, because what's in it for the investor? That's actually the question, the outcome of developing the business case. Why should we fund what we fund? What's in it for us? What's the reason for doing this? And so when we see a disconnect, and this is the discussion we just had here, is NGOs haven't made that switch yet. What is the business case for funding education? Because we need to recruit from there. So if you're an NGO and you say, just give me the money because, you know, early childhood development, you're going to do good in the community, it's not good enough. Why should you fund my organization? What's the value my program's going to contribute? What is the business case for that?